for having me, and I'm really excited to be here. So that's actually my first word, excited. My second word is grateful, because I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here before you today, and I'm also grateful to all of you for coming out and braving the cold and the rain, this November weather that we're getting in May. So I'm really happy about that, and I guess happy, always trying to find the joy out there. So yeah, my topic today is career search landmines, how to stop sabotaging your efforts and find your ideal job. And when I talk, I'll get into some things, and it's not just about finding your ideal job, but it's about really kind of finding your ideal life. And so that's what I'll be getting into with you today. So a little bit about my background and who I am. Can we get the light here? Thank you. That is so much better. The way I came to be doing this work is I'm a coach and consultant. And what I do in my coaching practice is basically I help people move into their second act. I help them bridge that transition and get them from one place to the next. And the way that I came to this area is, I can't remember your name, but the lady here in gray, I have a background in supplier diversity inclusion, which basically means I worked with small and minority, women-owned, diverse businesses, helping them get contracts for commercial entities and governments. And I spent most of my time working in the telecom industry. Very, very volatile industry, very fast-paced, just really crazy all the time. And before I had children, it was great. I did a lot of traveling. It was very stressful. It was fast-paced. It was wonderful. But I finally hit this point. I had a son at 12 years ago. And when that happened, things got a little different for me. The travel wasn't so cool anymore. Then I had some health challenges. Got diagnosed with Lyme disease. That became a really big issue. And so the stress and the pace and all of those things combined really kind of took a toll on me. And I realized that not only was it affecting me, but it was also affecting my son. And so I needed a huge change in my life. And the way that I came to that was, as he mentioned, I am a big believer in spiritual development, and so I prayed, I meditated, I did all the things that you do when you're in that kind of crossroads position, and I ended up getting a divine intervention, and it came in the form of a layoff. And usually people kind of give me a funny look when I say divine intervention and layoff in the same sentence, because well, how could that be possible? But sometimes, you have to look at things from a different perspective, and you got to figure out what you need and what works for you. So that's kind of how I came to be here. After I got the layoff, I started my coaching practice. Got certified while I was still working in my job. Kind of kept the certification for coaching on the shelf for a while, and once the layoff happened, I said, okay, now it's time. Let's start moving in that direction. So here I am, excited to be here with you guys today. So let's see. Okay. So today I'm going to be asking a lot of questions of you, and this is one of the first questions, and it's a biggie. So raise your left hand if you want to find your ideal job. Keep that hand up, keep that hand up. And now raise your right hand if you want to make that process easier and you want to make that process faster. Okay, good, that's pretty much everybody. So that's great, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. How to make the process as easy and fast as possible. So here's our agenda. I've got some objectives, and please excuse me with the chair here. I have a bum knee, and so I may have to sit for a little while if it starts to hurt. Right now I'm doing okay though. But I have 4 main objectives that I want you guys to take away today, or takeaways, and we'll get into those. Then I have some big questions. I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions, but I have a couple of questions that are really big questions, so I want you to take note of that. We're going to be doing some things to get clarity. We're also going to be looking at helping you to start creating your vision for the future, not just in terms of your ideal job, but in other areas of your life as well. So So I want you to really look at things with an open mind today and be open to the possibilities. The other thing I want to talk to you about will be connection and support, because whenever you're transitioning, connection and support are two really important keys to making your transition successful, whatever that transition may be. And of course, we'll have some interactive exercises. So that's what we'll be doing today. So let's jump right into it. Our objectives. The first one is I want you to shift your mindset. I want you to think about this time in your life as an opportunity for a transition and change. And the key word there is opportunity. Okay? A lot of times when people are at a point where they're looking for their next job or they've been laid off, you know, it's very easy to be overwhelmed, to be stressed out, to get depressed about the situation. I know that there have been times in my career that I've been in that place too and had those feelings as well. But it really helps you to move forward if you shift your perspective and start to look at it as an opportunity. And to look at it as an opportunity, the best way to do that is not so much focus on the past, but focus on your future. Okay? The second thing is I want you to update your program. And by program, I mean the one that's rolling around in your brain, because basically our brains are computers. So just like on your cell phone, you've got apps, and you know, sometimes the apps on your cell phone need to be updated. Sometimes they are running in the background and you can't get certain things done. It's like, why can't I make this call? Because you got these apps running in the background and they're just messing everything up. Sometimes you have to go in and you got to update those apps. Sometimes you have to go in and you actually have to delete them and start all over with new ones. So think about that from the perspective of your transition. Okay, you may have to make some changes, and as we're going through some things today, you may see where there are some apps or some programs that you need to do some updating to. The next is I want you to believe. That's the most important thing. If you want to accomplish anything, first you got to believe that you can do it. Sometimes that may be hard. I know a lot of people mentioned here that you've got some confidence issues, and that's certainly understandable. But those are all things that we can work through, and in order to get to the next step, you just have to believe that you can do it. You don't have to have all of the answers today or all of the answers at once. You don't have to have the full-scale plan, but just start with that little tiny belief, and as you add on to it, the plan grows, the belief gets bigger, and you're able to move forward. And the final thing here is you got to commit to action. Because let's face it, we can't get any results if we don't take any action, right? So that's one of the most important pieces. And one of the things that I like to talk to my clients about when I talk about action is there are two types of action. There's regular action, and then there's what I call inspired action. Inspired action is the action that is just for you. It is the action that is aligned to you and whatever you like to call your higher source or your higher power, that those actions that you take when you stop and think about what it is you need, not anyone else. There's 1,000 ways to do just about anything in the world, right? But just because there's 1,000 ways to do them doesn't mean that 999 of those ways are for you. So that really causes you to stop and connect in with yourself to see what's the best action for you to take in the moment. And also, committing to action, because you guys are already here today, you've already started committing to action. You're part of this organization, you showed up for this talk in the rain and the cold, so you're already on your way. So, the big questions. Here are a few. And there will be more, but why am I here? You know, what are you really meant to do? What am I meant to do? What truly makes me happy? How do I make an impact? I'm sure those are some of the questions that you probably have been asking yourself during this time of transition. And there probably are even more questions that you're asking yourselves. Where do you want to go with your life? Because like I said, at this point in your life, it's probably not just about finding the next job like it was when you were starting out your career. Now it's more about making an impact. Now it's about thinking about your life and saying, what makes me happy? Just because you did some work for the past 20 or 30 years, and maybe you were really good at it, but do you still love to do it? Do you still want to do it? Is there something else that you can take those same skills and put into something else that really has you passionate? Okay? So those are some of the things that we want to look at with the big questions. And the thing about these questions, even if you've thought about these, what you'll find as you're kind of going through the process and digging deeper is you want to keep asking yourselves these questions, because your answers can change. Today you ask the question and you get one answer, but as you continue to sort of pull the layers of the onion skin back, you'll get different answers, or you'll get more clear answers. So that's something to keep looking at. So clarity. Clarity is something that we want to get, and it will help us to answer those questions and so much more. This gentleman, Alex J. Morris, who's a golf instructor, said you must first clearly see a thing in your mind before you can actually do it. So I have a lot of clients who come to me and they say, hey, I'm in a transition, or I'm ready to transition. I want to do something different with my life. I'm not quite sure what that is, or they kind of have an idea of what it is, but they have no idea how to get there to that thing that they want to do. And basically, they're lacking clarity. And so part of what I do with them is help them get more clarity around what it is they want to do and where they want to go. Because here's the thing, you can't move forward if you don't know where you're going, right? So one of the things that I do with clients is we do assessments, various assessments, and I do some formal ones, but I actually prefer some of the more informal assessments because they're easier, they kind of take the pressure off. So here's one that I'm going to have you guys do, and it's actually on the handout. And I apologize for the very small writing. You can flip it over and write on the back if you need some extra room. This is what I call clarity on the job. And with this assessment, what you do is you're looking to figure out what you really love, what you really hated, and what you're kind of about with your last job. And so for purposes today, we're only going to use the most recent job, if you're either your current job or your past job. So for the love column, basically what feels great to you, what you look forward to, things that you can do for hours, things that you loathe, or things that just feel absolutely awful. In my case, it was always doing reporting. I just absolutely hated that. I'm not a numbers girl, and so when it was time to do monthly reports, I just felt sick until it was done. You have a sense of dread. You tend to kind of brace yourself, like, oh God, here it comes. And then the things that are sort of those are the things that you feel neutral about. You don't really love them, you don't really hate them, they're just part of the job, you just go with the flow, and you do them. So after you get those things down, then I want you to go back and take a look at these two columns again, low and met. And sometimes you will notice, after you really think about it, there might be some things that you put into the met column that really, you really think about it and you go, I really hate that. And you want to move it over. So this is kind of going to be an ongoing process. Because, we all get into that thing. It's like, well, this is just part of the job and I do it because I have to do it. But, maybe you don't really like it. And it's okay to admit that you don't like it, because what this is doing for you is it's just helping you get clear. So when you start to go out and look for your next position, you'll kind of have a list and you'll know what it is you love, what it is you don't love, and the final column here are going to be your deal breakers. You're just not feeling it at all, you can't do it, you won't do it no matter what, and that's that. For me, this one right here was my deal breaker. I'm a single mom. I had a kid. I cannot travel 50% of the time. Just couldn't do it. And so that became really something very difficult and challenging for me. Now, while I was actually working in my last position, I was lucky enough that because I guess lucky and unlucky, working in telecom, there are so many, it's so volatile and there's so many changes all the time. There were always restructuring. And so my job changed like 50 times, even though it was the same job. And so the part of my job that required me to travel kind of went away and it went to other people. So I was really lucky with that. But that would have been a really big problem for me to have to travel. So take your time, respond to those questions, and then we'll kind of go over that and a few people share. In your love column, something that you did at your job that you just absolutely love to do. Yes.
Negotiating love, negotiating settling.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
Mentoring others and teaching.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites too. Okay.
Working with international executives and clients.
Okay, great. So how about the low column? Yes.
I'm a little worried that was the first thing that popped out for me was all of the lows. But budgeting 8 hours of meetings a day, 14, 16-hour days.
Okay. And don't be concerned if the low part pops out first. That's okay, because usually when we think about what it is we want, a lot of times it's a lot easier to think of the things that we don't want than it is to think of the ones that we do. So if you start there, that's perfectly okay. You don't have to do it in any particular order. And we'll just skip the math. But how about the deal breakers? Anybody got some deal breakers they want to share? Yes.
Commuting across the river.
What's wrong with commuting? I commuted across the river. I live in Virginia.
From which side? Well, imagine it works both ways. From Maryland to Virginia is a nightmare.
Yes, it is.
No benefits.
No, yeah.
Got to have the health insurance, especially. Yeah.
Yeah.
Killing me.
But
Yeah.
I think the travel is a big thing.
Yeah, travel gets old. You know, when you're starting out in your career, it's like really fun and sexy. And oh, I was in this city, and then the next day I was in that city, and then suddenly you get to a point. Even before I had kids, I kind of got over the travel. It was just like it was too much, because what you end up finding, especially when you're doing business travel, as you probably know, you spend most of your time either in taxis or now Ubers. And in hotel rooms or conference rooms and airports and airplanes, and you don't even get to really enjoy the cities that you're going to. So it's kind of like, I bother. So, but this exercise is one, and this is kind of the start of that. But I'd like you to keep this kind of open when you leave here, and continue to go back and not just look at your most recent jobs, but then start going further back into your career and pulling those things out. Because again, as you're applying for new positions and you're trying to make that transition and move forward, just really knowing what it is you love, what it is you don't love, you know, what you really, really consider to be a deal breaker. That's really important, because not knowing that, that's one of the ways that you can definitely sabotage yourself, because you're applying for things and maybe you even get those jobs, but then you end up in them and you know, you're excited for 2 weeks because, yay, I got a job. But then it's like, oh, I'm miserable because I have a 2-hour commute every single day, and I hate that. So just keep that in mind and just kind of keep using it as a stepping point to keep going back to. So, lack of clarity. According to Steve Maraboli, who's a motivational speaker, lack of clarity creates chaos and frustration. And those emotions are poison to any living goal. And that is so true. But lack of clarity also creates a lot of other things. It can create overwhelm. It can create stress. It can create all kinds of things for you. And so just making sure that you're really clear about what it is you want to do, and where you want to go is very important. It can also create procrastination. And, because when you're not quite sure what it is you're supposed to be doing, it's really kind of hard to take that first step and do pretty much anything because you're not sure. It's like my son he was assigned to do a paper. He wasn't quite sure on the instructions for what he needed to do, so he ended up writing a very good paper, but until he got really clear on what was needed and what the requirements were and what direction he was supposed to go in, he just couldn't do anything. He was just stuck, and that happens with us too. And it doesn't just happen with our job search, but it happens in all aspects of our lives. So just kind of keep that in mind. And one of the final things that lack of clarity does is it basically causes you to lower your standards sometimes. Sometimes it causes you to lower your expectations because you're not quite sure what direction you should be going in or what you should do. So you kind of just accept whatever comes to you because you haven't thought clearly about it. So here is the secret. And the secret to getting more clear is to first ask yourself those big questions and keep asking those big questions and add to that list of big questions. Whether those big questions are specifically about your career or whether they're about your personal life, just keep adding those questions and asking. And then when you look for the answers to the questions, look within first. Everybody out there is an expert on something. Nowadays, all you need is a phone, and you can be a reporter or a top expert in this, that, or the other. You post something on some website or on social media, and everybody is an expert. But in order for you to really get the answers that you need and want to move forward, you really have to go within yourself to find those answers. Now, it's okay after you get those answers to sort of reach out to experts after that to help you come up with a plan and to help you move forward, but nobody is going to be able to tell you what the best next step for you is. What do you love? What do you want to do? What's going to make an impact? What's going to make you happy? Nobody can answer those questions for you except you. And finally, the last part of that secret is once you're finding those answers, start asking yourself why, so you can understand that, because the why is really what motivates you to move forward in the first place. Are you doing it because you really want it and you really love it, or are you doing it because everybody else is? Or are you doing it because the experts said this is the best thing for you to do in this situation, so you're going to just kind of roll on with it?
Or maybe you're doing it because you think that's where all the jobs are.
Yes.
And it's an easy,
Yes.
it's the low hanging fruit.
That is very true. When I was starting college, of course, all the jobs were in IT and computers and everything. And that's just, it was something that I did not have interest in. And so my mom kept putting me into these computer classes and STEM programs. And I was like, okay, yes, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to get this degree and I'm going to make a whole lot of money. And I just could not do very well in classes because I had no interest in it. And so finally, by the time I graduated from high school, I realized this is not my thing. I'm a journalism girl, and so that's what I should be studying is communication or something along those lines. That's what I moved into, and I moved forward with that. But yeah, that's a very, very, very good point. So thank you for that. Any other comments or questions as we're moving along? Okay. So the other thing that you need to take a look at are your beliefs and your expectations. Because remember, we said lack of clarity can cause you to lower your standards and lower your expectations. So in terms of beliefs, basically, we all have our belief systems. And what we do as we go through life is we look for things we look for evidence to support whatever our beliefs are. And it doesn't really, it's not really difficult to find that evidence. It's all around us because our beliefs are so strong in most cases about most things that, it's easy to pick up those beliefs and keep going with them. And what we also do is then we match our expectations to the beliefs that we have. So my question for you, though, are your beliefs and expectations really serving you? And also, where are your beliefs and expectations coming from? And how is that making an impact on your life? I have an interesting story about beliefs. I have a client who is on her second marriage. And she'd been married for probably about 10 years or so. And she had these financial goals that she and her husband were trying to meet. And they were actually doing okay on the goals, but she had a personal goal related to their finances, and that personal goal was around them having a joint bank account. She did not have a joint bank account with her first husband, and that marriage ended, which has nothing to do with anything, but just putting it there. And she kept kind of harassing her husband to the point that he was just really frustrated and resentful. She wanted to do this joint bank account. And so we had a conversation during our sessions several times, and it kept coming up. So I asked her, I'm like, why is it so important to you? What is it about this joint bank account? Because, you seem to be doing okay without it. So she thought about it, and that was the thing. She didn't even have an immediate answer. It took her a moment to even think about it and come up with an answer. She thought about it, and what she told me was she and her siblings, she had 4 sisters, when all of them were ready to get married, their father sat them down and gave them a talk. And the talk included all these things that you're supposed to do as a good wife when you're married, and older generation father, of course. And one of those things, you're supposed to get a joint bank account with your husband. That's like one of the first things. And so she just felt that she was not doing what her father wanted all these years. And, she kind of tied that to some of the issues in her first marriage, because there were some issues around finances. Of course, that had nothing to do with anything. And we did work through some of those things. But it was like this whole big thing in her head, this belief that she had. Well, long story short, after we went through this process, she let go of that. About a month or so later, she was actually having a conversation with her mother. And she told her mother what was going on. And when she told her mother, her mom just kind of laughed at her and said, oh girl, your dad, yeah, we have a joint bank account, and we've had a joint bank account since we got married, but what he doesn't know is I also had my own separate account since we got married. And I would recommend any woman have their own separate bank account, of course. And so she was just like, I just felt so silly when my mother told me that. But I mean, that's an example of taking someone else's belief system, turning it into yours. And a lot of times it happens when we're very young. I mean, when she was on her first marriage, she was probably in her early 20s. And so, our parents, our authority figures, teachers, and people in our lives, supervisors, managers, the experts, the media, they all kind of color our beliefs and what our belief systems look like. It's very easy to turn on the TV or social media on any day at any given time, and you've got 1,000 people telling you what you should believe, what you should do, what you should eat, what you should drink, where you should go, where you should live, all of those things. And, it kind of gets caught into our subconscious. And it's really important to sometimes take a step back and review what's really yours and what's really not. What do I need to keep? What do I need to let go? So, the moral of the story with beliefs and expectations, if you want something different, you have to expect something different and do something different. And one more quote about expectations. You have to expect the best to get the best. And that is from Norman Vincent Peale, author and speaker. And the reason I chose that quote is simply because he was one of the founding members of 40 Plus. And that quote was actually from his famous book, The Power of Positive Thinking. So now I have a second assessment for you, and it's also on the paper, and I know that the questions are very, very small. But here are some questions for you to look at, and right now for this presentation we're focused on these questions as it relates to your ideal job, but you can reword these at some point on your own and make them more about your personal life. So, do you really believe that you can have your ideal job or your ideal life? What do you believe about the job search process? Do you find it easy? Is it hard? Is it frustrating? It's probably all of those things. It's certainly very different today than it was, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Is the job search process unfairly geared towards millennials or men or women or anybody other than you? And if that's true, why do you think that? To be successful, do you believe that you need to have high stress or to make a certain salary or have lots of credentials or have a certain title? I actually had, in one of my first jobs, I had a supervisor who really believed in the high stress thing. He had a secretary back in those days, and she would fill up his calendar with meetings literally from like 7 a.m. to 7 at night, sometimes 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And I just thought that was the craziest thing. And I'm like, well, she reports to you. If you don't want to have all these meetings, you should just sit her down and tell her, this is how I'd like for you to block my schedule out. And he looked at me and he was completely shocked. And he's like, this means I'm important. I'm supposed to have stress. I'm supposed to be in meetings all day, every day. And I just thought, that is the craziest thing I ever heard. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I don't know. You know, this is really my first job. I'm only in my 20s. What do I know? But it just kept like sticking in the back of my mind that this can't possibly be true. This is not the way it should be, I don't think. Finally, years later, when he had a heart attack, he realized that maybe he should change the way he was doing things, and he stopped that. But think about that. So the next question, what do you believe about your skills, about your age, your gender, your ethnicity, as it relates to your job? Does that make it easier or more difficult to find your ideal job? Is it possible? And finally, do you believe any of the issues in the questions above have impacted getting your ideal job or your ideal life? And if so, why or why not? So if you want to just take a few minutes and jot some things down. And like I said, I know that you probably won't have all of the answers today, and that's okay. This is kind of a starting point, and these are the kinds of questions that you constantly go back to over time. Because the answers can change. You know, today your answer may be, do you really believe you can have your ideal job? And maybe you really don't believe that. But as you continue to work and uncover things and do more, then maybe that belief can actually shift into, yes, I can have my ideal job. So who believes they can have their ideal job?
As far as, do I really believe I can have my ideal job or life? I want to believe that. I can't honestly say I do.
All right. Well, that's a good start that you want to believe, because there are some people who actually go to the point of saying, well, it's just not possible. So I don't even want to believe that I can do it. You know, so that's a good start.
How do you tackle that, though? How do you address that? Getting from want to believing to believing.
Tiny little shifts. I have a tool that I work with my clients on. We do a lot of what I call energy management. And one of these tools is a belief transformation tool. And we just start with a simple belief, and we rate the belief at whatever you feel, 10 being the highest, really strongly. And we just work through changing very, very slowly over time until we get the belief from a 10 all the way down to a 0. And finding evidence, going back and finding evidence to support why is it, how is it possible that I could have my ideal job? Have I done things I love in the past? Do other people have ideal jobs? And what does an ideal job look like for me? So we kind of work through that process. And that's one of the ways to do that. So,
But your ideal job, again, with ideal jobs, mine is kind of a broader perspective. It's not specific, like this, that.
mm-hmm.
But that also changes, or there may be aspects of that ideal job that are more important than others.
Right.
And for me, I'm finding that I have to have a balance between working with people and working by myself.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a balance.
Yeah, it can be a balance. And usually when you start asking those questions, they start off broad, but then as you get closer into getting what you want and you start to get more clarity, you do start to get more specific and you start to narrow things down a lot more. And just as you're doing that narrowing process, you get to a point where you decide, okay, here are the things that are really, really important to me. Because when you first think about it, okay, my ideal job, I will make $1 million a minute. I'll only work 1 day a month. You know, I'll get 6 months of vacation every year, and you know, it's this really big thing. And then you start looking at it, and you say, okay, well, that's probably not realistic, and maybe that's not even really what I want. And you start to hone in more and more. And from that honing in, you'll start to be able to prioritize what really, really is important to you, and you kind of work from there. You know, and sometimes getting your ideal job is really about creating a job. It's not so much about applying to a job that's already out there. It could be, you know, figuring out a way to get into a company and create a position for yourself, or, you know, add something along to some work that you're doing, and maybe you're doing something else on the side, or there are a lot of ways to look at what an ideal job would look like. Anybody else?
I guess for me, like the ideal job for me, the one I prepared really, has been flexibility. I talked about that earlier. Yeah. I was looking at that, the second to last question of what do you do about your skills, age, gender, et cetera. Notwithstanding the feeling that the skills things from these really from contracting, but I know like one of my beliefs has really been that because of so many health issues, disability, whatever you want to call it, that's been some of the hindrance for me. Because my thing has been, I don't want to be that new hire who already has to have that need for flexibility. I've been wanting to be that employee that I used to be, the one who could take my money. I'm finally realizing 4 years later that the likelihood of that happening is really slim to none, and I'm going to need that flexibility from the get-go. But I hate that so much. And it's like, great, now they're going to have certain beliefs about me. Now they're going to perceive me differently. Now that, you know, my future coworkers, team members, etc., would also not feel really good about having someone new come on or ready to do all that stuff. That's like been the belief that's really kind of held me back in some way. And like I know reaching out to other people, including other fellow patients, that there are different ways around it. I know about the reasonable accommodations that you can get, HR people and all that good stuff. But I just have a really hard time with that one. Like I think contracting for me, like, it's been ideal to the extent that it is 100% flexibility. You cannot find that anywhere else as far as I know. It's been accommodating beyond belief as far as all these different doctor appointments, all this physical therapy and all that stuff. But the flip side is no benefits.
Right.
That's been the challenge.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of dealing with that belief, you're kind of projecting that belief on your potential management and your coworkers, because you haven't even met these people yet, so you don't know what they believe. So that belief is your belief, and so you've got to start there and work on changing your belief about it. And here's something I can tell you: when you change your beliefs about things and how you feel about something, you change your energy, you change your vibration, you change what you're projecting out to the world. And a lot of times people see what you're projecting out. It's not necessarily something that you have to say to them. It's just that feeling that they have. And I have a great example of that too. I have a client who has a full-time job. She's an accountant, and she has a business on the side. And she has, for many, many years, always been able to manage her business and being a full-time accountant at a very large company. And I have often wondered how she's managed to do that. And it's really just about what's going on in her head. When it's time for her to go out and do her business, she actually is a entertainer and professional storyteller, and she does presentations and things like that. But when it's time for her to go out and take on those jobs and, you know, do commercials and go to auditions and all of that kind of stuff, she works with a group of people who says, okay, go ahead, take tomorrow off. We'll see you back here on Wednesday so that you can finish up doing your work. And they give her the flexibility needed. And that wasn't always the case with her, but she started to change her belief system and change the way that she looked at things and the way that she dealt with things. And the people around her just kind of came up to match where she was with her own beliefs. And it's made a huge difference. She is one of the few people that I know that is able to actually work a full-time job and have the kind of position that she has. I mean, I know people who are in entertainment, but they're like waitresses. And not that anything's wrong with being a waitress, but, you know, it's a whole different area. It's a whole different level. But I mean, she works in a Fortune 500 company as a senior manager in accounting. And it's just incredible that she has the opportunity to do these things. So, any other comments before we move on to the next thing here? No? Okay. Well, one last thing I want you to think about in terms of your beliefs is also the labels that we put on ourselves and the labels that we allow other people to put on ourselves, because those things affect our beliefs and our expectations as well. You know, and labels could be anything from, like, you know, maybe when you were growing up, you were known as the smart kid, and that kind of stuck with you and stayed with you. Maybe in your job, you became the office mom, or, you know, the nurturer, the person who took care of everything and everybody, and that kind of thing, and those labels stick with you. Sometimes labels are a good thing, sometimes they're right on and they're perfectly okay. But then there are other times where the labels that we have on ourselves no longer serve us. They don't fit anymore. And so that's again where we need to do some reprogramming and some updating. Maybe we need to change what those labels look like. And when you have labels that are maybe put on you in your younger years, especially as a kid growing up, a lot of times it's out of your control. But as adults, we get to define who we are, and we get to define what we are. And if there's a label that we have, we get to decide what that label is or is not. So just keep that in mind. So, and remember this quote from W.C. Fields, and he says, "It ain't what they call you, it's what you answer to." So now we're going to flip it around a little bit and look into some more big questions. And the next big question is, what do you really love to do? What do you really want to do? And that boils down to passion. And as interesting as it may be, a lot of times people don't know what they're passionate about. You know, when you're a kid growing up, you know, there were certain things that you just really loved to do all the time. For me, it was playing with my Barbies. And that was my thing. But as I grew up, and, you know, as you grow up, your passions change, your interests change. But then once you get into adulthood and you start adulting, you have all of these responsibilities that you have to take care of. And you got to be, you know, you got to take care of maybe a spouse or kids or older parents. You got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of your job and your career. There are certain ways that you're supposed to be and act and do and all of those kinds of things. And sometimes in the process of all of that, sometimes you just kind of forget about what do I love to do, because you're kind of running through life on autopilot. I mean, I certainly went through that for a very long period of time. Like, if somebody would ask me, what do you want to do with your life? I just didn't even have an answer, because all I could think about was, well, I got to get my kid to school, I got to go to work, and I got to get this presentation done and get that report done, and then I've got to go take care of my mom, and I got to do these things, and then at the end of the day, I'm going to go to sleep because I'm exhausted, and that's as much bandwidth as I had, and that's as much as I could think about. So sometimes it takes a moment to sit down and really figure out what you're passionate about and what you're interested in, but it's really worth taking the time to do that. And if you're not quite sure, the next slide will tell you. But a few points on passion. Passion fuels your purpose, but it does not define your purpose, but it can certainly add fuel to it. passions and interests can change. Your purpose generally remains consistent. So, just as an example, when I was a little girl, I liked to play with my Barbies. Well, of course, I'm not playing with Barbies anymore. But the thing that I played with my Barbies, the thing that I did with them was I would always teach them. So I had a chalkboard, and after school every day, I would line them up in my room with my stuffed animals, and I would teach them whatever lessons I learned at school that day. And so what do I do in my career now? I teach, I train, I coach, I do all of those things. That has always pretty much been my purpose. And it also happens to be my passion as well. So that's just an example of that. And finally, sometimes the best way to get to your purpose is to start with what you're passionate about. So let's start there. So what's your passion? I like to try to break it down to help you get a little more honed in on what it is into these 4 different areas. So starting off here with gifts. Gifts are the things that flow authentically and intuitively from you. They are a natural expression of your purpose. And when you think of gifts, gifts are kinds of the things that you just kind of are born knowing how to do. I have an example of a student that I grew up with and went to school with. We started kindergarten together. And on the first day of kindergarten, we were all supposed to draw pictures of our families. And so we had a class of like 20, 30 kids. Everybody draws a family of stick people, except this one kid named Jared. Jared made a complete comic book. He didn't just draw one picture. He actually made a complete comic book that looked like it came from DC or Marvel themselves. You know, it was colored. He had a story to go along with it. It was beautiful. This kid had a gift. And I remember the teacher asking his mom at the end of the school day about his drawing. And she was like, I was just amazed to see him do this. And she goes, oh yeah, he's been able to do that since, you know, as soon as he picked up a pencil, he was able to actually do that. So that was a gift for him. Now talents are basically your natural ability or your gift plus practice and study. And it can be a conduit for gifts to flow. So talents would be, in Jared's case, he had the natural gift and ability, but then he did a lot of study in school. He went to art school, and now he's actually a famous artist in my hometown. So there. Or, you know, if you have someone who has a natural ability in, say, a sport, they can play the sport really well, but then in order to be the next LeBron or Michael Jordan or whomever, they've got to practice a lot. They've got to do some study, that kind of thing. Skills are intense study or training that's either formally or informally. So any of your degrees, certifications, things like that. From the informal standpoint, just watching YouTube videos. I have a cousin who is really into cosplay, and she wanted to make her own costumes and do the makeup and the hair and all of that stuff. She didn't know how to do that, and she started doing this when she was in high school, actually. So she just started watching YouTube videos, and she learned how to do it. Now she goes to all these conferences and things. She wins all the contests, and she's like a superstar in the cosplay world. And finally, passions. Passions are the things that light you up, and they make you forget about time. They make you forget about money. I mean, you never really forget about money unless you're independently wealthy, of course. But passions are the kinds of things that, you know, if you really had to do it for free, you probably would or could. You could figure out a way to make it work. Or if you start something at, say, 7 in the morning, you look up and it's after lunch, and you're like, oh my gosh, where did time go? That's your passion. So the next thing talks about our passion and purpose equation. So basically, all of your past experiences in your life, plus your gifts, your talents, your skills, and your passions equal your purpose. And it's just a matter of working to uncover all of those different areas. And finally, connection and support. That is also a way that we can sabotage ourselves by not having connection and support to make the transition and to get to where we want to be and to what we need. Connection and support helps us stay motivated. It helps either keep us confident or build our confidence if we don't have the confidence. It helps us stay productive, and it helps us keep accountable with what we're doing. I have a client, not a client, but a colleague who is a grief counselor, and she talks about job loss, any kind of job loss for any reason at all. And she says that there's a lot of emotional and psychological trauma that's involved in that process. And what happens with a lot of people is they don't want to look at it as trauma. You know, it's like, oh yeah, just trying to brush it off. That's the way the world works nowadays. And people kind of, you know, push it down or just push it to the side and let go of it. But really it's kind of eating away at them. And when you don't have that connection, you don't have somebody who's in the same thing that you're going through, the same thing that you're going through, it can be really challenging. It can be really tough. And if you do, a lot of times you end up, which this is something that I experienced, you have people who are going through the same thing, but they're not in a good place. And so you get together and then you spend all of your time having a pity party and having a venting session. And even though you've been out of the job for a year, I still have a coworker who does this. He's been out of his job, our job together for probably, I think he's been gone from that company for maybe 5 or 6 years. Every time I talk to him, he still brings up things that happened 5 or 6 years ago when he's still working there, and all the stuff that, and it's like, come on, dude, you gotta move on. You gotta move on. You need some help with doing that. So connection and support can basically help you to move on and can help you to just release and let go of some of the baggage that you might be having about the situation. So 2 good quotes on connection and support. From Robin Sharma: the business of business is relationships. The business of life is human connection. And my favorite, Tim Gunn, who's from Project Runway: life is not a solo act. It's a huge collaboration, and we all need people around us who care about us and who support us. And certainly you can get support from organizations like this. This is a wonderful organization to have access to, and all the information that they have here. And also you can get support and connection through coaching. So finally, some last big questions that I have for you here. So, what is your vision for your ideal job or your next chapter? What's your vision for the future? What do you really see for yourself? And, you know, that may change. It may be one thing today, it might be something else next week or next month, and that's okay. It can continue to evolve, but at least you need to start looking at it to figure out what that looks like to you. So, when you have your vision for your ideal job or your next chapter, how will your life look? You know, what do you see for yourself? How will you feel? And feeling is very important too. It's not just enough to have it in your head and have the vision of it, but what's it going to actually, what do you want it to feel like? Okay? What will be different for you? And what impact will you make on the world with your new ideal job or your new ideal life? So, I talked about a couple of things and a lot of things here. And one of the things that I want to do as a thank you, because like I said, I am very grateful for being here, is I want to offer you a free e-guide. And in my free e-guide, what I talk about a little bit is visioning. And I want to offer that to you. So on the handout that I gave, the half sheet of paper, if you complete that and give me your information, I will send you a link to that e-guide. So that will be one free gift. And the second free gift that I'm offering is what I call a breakthrough clarity session. So it'll be an opportunity for you guys to call me up and we can sit down and talk through what's going on with you, help you get some clarity on that. And that's a process that I use with clients when I'm starting to work with them. And I will give that to you for a 45-minute session. It's normally a 30-minute session, but again, as a thank you to you guys, I'd like to make it into a 45-minute session so that you have more time to talk about that. So those are some things that I'm offering to you. And thank you so much for having me. Here is my contact information. I also have business cards if you need those and you want to talk to me more. And I've seen people taking pictures of the screen. So if you're interested in getting a copy of the slide presentation, you can just reach out to me by email and I can send you the presentation. So,
Yeah,
thank
we'll
you.
just leave that up to you. Great, Renee.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.